And thank you, everybody that's watching this. I hear that there's over 1,000 people around the world watching this broadcast, so welcome. And I hope to make this third panel interesting. Latvians say, "Trīs lietas, labas lietas," and let's keep that going. Before I get into talking about Europe's transition to green energy and how Latvia can capitalize from it, I want to tell you a story. I want to tell you about the year 1948. Europe is in shambles. It's the wake of the Second World War. There are many Latvians, over 100,000 Latvians in displaced persons camps in Germany and elsewhere in the West, looking for a new future, a new hope. Europe's having a very difficult time getting back off its feet. And to help this process, the Americans implemented what was called the Marshall Plan. And in today's dollars, the Marshall Plan was equivalent to about $120 billion over 4 years, from 1948 to 1952. This is a considerable amount of money. Since the affirmation of the European Green Deal, it is planned that in next year alone, Europe will spend over 10 times the amount of the entire Marshall Plan in investing in the transition to green energy. We're not going to stop there. Goldman Sachs calculates that over the next 30 years, to reach carbon neutrality by 2050 in accordance with the Paris Accord, Europe will have to spend over $7 trillion, my apologies, the numbers are very big, $7 trillion in investments in the transition to green energy. What's more, Goldman also calculates that every dollar spent on the transition to green energy will have a 5 times multiplier in terms of its impact on GDP. Put simply, what we're looking at is a scenario where Europe over the next 30 years will be investing $35 trillion, or will have that benefit to its GDP based on its investments in green energy. To put this in context, the current Latvian GDP is 35 billion euros. So what we're looking at in effect with Europe's transition to green energy is an impact, an economic impact, not to mention societal or climate impact, just an economic impact that's over 1,000 times Latvia's current GDP. I've been in capital markets for over 20 years. I've devoted my professional career to finding the industries and the companies that will change our world, that will make the most money for their shareholders. When the Green Deal was affirmed in December of last year, we immediately recognized the opportunity going forward, and the thumbs were staggering. We started investing in new energy companies and have already done very well for our clients. But the story's only getting started. Mark Carney, who was just the governor of the most recent governor of the Bank of England, and prior to that the governor of the Bank of Canada, recently started a new job at Brookfield Asset Management as head of environmental, societal, and government initiatives and impact investing. Mark Carney has one of the greatest CVs in the world right now. He could have chosen anything, and he chose to devote his time and his future energies to impact investing, especially in the environmental segment. Large institutional money is getting the signals and moving towards investing in a clean energy future. And it's our hope through this panel that we will inspire Latvian businesses, entrepreneurs, and scientists and politicians to understand the transformative effect of the EU Green Deal over the next 30 years and how it will change the economy as we know it, and hopefully the world as we know it in our lifetime here in Europe. I'm extremely pleased with our panel of experts today. I'm not an expert, I'm just a banker looking at things from above, but we have a very talented panel of experts, and I would like to introduce them. First off, we have Erik Birkerts. Erik is the Chief Executive Officer of Clean Energy Trust and is responsible for leading the organization in its mission of bringing impactful innovation to markets by finding, funding, and growing startups, commercializing green energy, decarbonization, and environmental sustainability solutions. Erik has been on the senior management team for 2 IPOs of venture capital-backed companies, including serving as Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of publicly traded Orion Energy Systems. Erik currently serves on the board of directors for Milbank Manufacturing, the largest manufacturer in the US of electrical metering housings and related equipment, including electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Erik also serves as a senior advisor to Metris Energy Efficiency Finance, and a board observer for Nanograph Corporation, which deals in advanced materials. He's also on the advisory council for Argonne National Laboratories Chain Reaction Innovations Program, the advisory board of Northwestern University's New Vention Program, and is a mentor for Loyola University, Chicago's Baumhart Scholars Program, and is a strategist for the Obama Foundation Scholars Program at the Harris School for Public Policy at the University of Chicago. Eric earned his MBA at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business and his BA with honors in economics and international relations from Tufts University. Eric Birkets has over 30 years of operational and general management experience, including project financing and strategy development for industrial, energy efficiency, and clean technology companies. Eric, thank you for joining us from Chicago today. Next up, and who will be joining us here in the studio, will be Maria Rocheska. Welcome, Maria.
Hi, guys. Well, I'm not shaking hands, right?
No handshaking. Over the years, Maria has left an indelible handprint on the local and regional startup scene here in Latvia, and also the Baltics. As a co-founder of Helve, a strategic innovation company, she works with ambitious organizations committed to creating the future instead of being disrupted by it. I really like that sentence. Helve provides end-to-end services to help organizations committed to unrelenting growth by leveraging experience and networks to drive change through transformation, communication, and strategic partnerships. She is also the force of nature behind the Baltic Tech Conference TechChill, and has been instrumental in the driving of growth of the nonprofit organization going by the same name. As co-founder, member of the board, and former chief executive of TechChill Foundation, she ensured that her passion as an evangelist for the Baltics as a startup-friendly location was translated into concrete policy. TechChill is now the leading platform in the Baltics for matching startup entrepreneurs, disruptors, investors, and others with an interest in the sector. Maria, thank you for joining us in the studio today.
Thank you.
Next up, joining us from Riga, but virtually, is Aivars Starikovs. Aivars Starikovs is a member of the board of Hydrogen Europe, which represents the European industry, national associations, and research centers active in the hydrogen and fuel cell sectors. Aivars is also the chairman of the board of the Latvian Hydrogen Association, advisor for energy and alternative fuels to the president of the Latvian Academy of Sciences, and a member of the Riga City Council Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technology Advisory Board. His current responsibilities include international cooperation, coordination, and with responsible ministries and municipal authorities, infrastructure business plan development and implementation, and providing excellence in research, development, and management. Currently, Aivars, as Northeast European Cluster Coordinator, is working on the development of a joint procurement strategy for fuel cell buses that would reduce the cost of implementing zero-emission hydrogen transport. Previously, he was a coordinator for the National State Research Program, Latvian, whose purpose was to evaluate the use of hydrogen technologies in a stationary and mobile applications in Latvia. Thank you for joining us today, Aivars. Good to see you. Next up is Laura Tima. Laura Tima currently works as a researcher in the University of Latvia and also acts as an independent expert on the European Commission. Her passion to combine engineering and social science on topics related to energy and the environment. She has a doctoral degree in environmental engineering, and Laura has worked and studied in 6 countries. Her work has resulted in over 50 scientific articles that were presented in more than 15 countries, and thus attracted more than 4.5 million euros to science. She is one of the 5 people in Latvia that had their research project funded under the highly competitive Marie Sklodowska-Curie Fellowship. Currently, she continues her education at Riga University, Latvia, and represents the Republic of Latvia in the COST project, COST being the European Cooperation in Science and Technology project, as a management committee member. Moreover, she recently became an expert at the Latvian Council of Science and got invited to act as the topic editor at the international scientific journal Sustainability. Thank you for joining our panel today, Laura. Last but certainly not least is Kārlis Vasarājs. Kārlis Vasarājs is the co-founder and executive vice president of Valens, an energy technology company. Concurrently, Kārlis is CEO of Imtex, an energy efficiency technology, recently securing 20 million in a funding round that included SABIC Ventures. He is a board member and strategic advisor to multiple hydrogen and circular economy technology companies. As entrepreneurs, Kārlis and his business partner have raised over $300 million, leading to the successful commercialization of 6 clean technologies. He serves as honorary consul for Latvia in Southern Ontario, Canada, and is chair of the St. John's Evangelical Latvian Lutheran Church of Toronto Council. He holds a master's degree from Johns Hopkins University's SAIS program in energy and environmental policy. Karli, thank you for joining us from Toronto today.
Thank you for having me.
And Karli, we're going to start with you. You've studied energy and environmental policy, and I'd like to know how, in your mind, how significant is Europe's plan to transition to green energy? Is this one of the most transformative opportunities of the century?
Great. Well, thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me. And the answer is absolutely. It was last November when we were just closing off an investment with a major oil and gas company. And the senior executive there said, you know what? Kickstarting the energy transition in Europe is not going to be that hard. The only thing is we need the EU to agree to kickstarting it with 1 to 2 trillion euros of funding.
Which they did a month later.
Fast forward 8 months later, and we got more than that. We got a lot more than that in terms of commitments and funding both from governments and private sectors to kickstart this. And why has this happened? Well, we all know that the European economies across the board have flatlined. The European Central Bank, with its theories of quantitative easing, can only go so far. And we all know that so many Scandinavian countries and other ones just can't give away money anymore. And if people aren't using money to stimulate the economies, we have no other options. And so, yes, the Green Deal is here, and it does make a lot of sense at the macro European level. It was done because there's no other way to move the economy right now, and it is a great way to move the economy, as you said, and started your speech so nicely with Europe's Marshall Plan. But we're here today really as Latvians, and so what does this mean to Latvia? Well, earlier today, Untitled said that, yes, Latvia is the second greenest nation in Europe. What does that mean? Yes, we're covered in trees, but has Latvia really driven any sort of innovation in the green economy? And in my opinion, no. We've been endowed with great natural resources, hydropower for our rivers, and that's really why Latvia is considered a green economy. We have a whole bunch of untapped resources that really require capital that Latvia has never had to really get Latvia moving in the direction of a true green economy.
Ostensibly,
Latvians don't want. Sorry?
Latvia can now borrow money for next to nothing, in fact, almost -%. Would you support the notion that this money that Latvia could borrow could be invested into green energy initiatives?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Latvians don't want wind parks in their backyards. Latvians don't want more electricity grids along the way. We enjoy our green lifestyles, and the reality is we don't need wind farms in our backyards. You know, the cost of offshore wind has dropped so dramatically over the past 5 years that Latvia can achieve 100% of its green electricity requirements just by building 2 to 3 gigawatts of offshore wind power and bringing it via underwater cable into Riga. This project alone can be financed using these EU funds. We as Latvia can own this project. We do not need to sell it to the Swedes. We do not need to sell it to the Finnish people. The Latvian people can own this project. That is energy independence. That is what creates an economy that can propel itself even further.
You mentioned energy. You mentioned energy independence, Karli. You're Latvia's honorary consul to Southern Ontario. Latvia and Canada are strong NATO partners. Does our future energy policy affect our national security?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and it's not just energy policy. Think of this. Latvia today spends over 6 billion euros a year on fuel, natural gas, diesel, gasoline for our cars. That is 6 billion euros sent to Russia in order to fund disinformation, and that is billions of euros sent to Norway to pay for their illustrious trillion-dollar pension fund for their children. What better way than to reinvest that 6 billion euros right back in Latvia, so those profits create the multiplier effect that you spoke of for economic benefit right here in Latvia. More so, if the Latvian government had more money to spend, we'd have more money to spend on security. We can only spend so much of our GDP on bolstering our forces, bolstering our security, because it's a function of how much is available in the GDP budget. If we're able to grow our GDP, we could spend more money on military. Finally, one of the biggest and of course fundamental issues with disinformation campaigns is they require some sort of fundamental crack or fissure in the economy, where the fundamental one in Latvia, of course, the difference between the rich and the poor. People in Riga are relatively well off. People in Latgale are not. And if we want to reduce the amount of wealth discrepancy across Latvia, we have to ensure that economic benefit, which can be driven into Latgale, comes through this Green Deal.
Okay, but people are often afraid of change. How do we, and Latvians also tend to be superstitious and set in their ways. How do we endorse this change? How do we motivate those people that are suspicious of those people wanting to advance these projects? We've had some poor experience in the past about people taking advantage of funding, but what we're talking about is funding in an order of magnitude that is bigger than anything we've ever seen before. How can we make sure this money gets into the proper hands and actually leads to development rather than going into somebody's pockets and eventually siphoning out of the country?
You're absolutely right. I mean, the first time Latvia tried to green itself is when it started with feed-in tariffs, or the famous OIK, or the premiums that went on electricity. It was shown that on an annual basis, 70% of those premiums went out to be paid to Russian-based interests. Of course people are going to be suspicious of that, particularly because that was brought forth by the Green Party, which of course is the people we certainly hope to see soon behind bars, if not at least charged for corruption. The benefit of what Latvia did is it stopped the feed-in tariffs, and it stopped overdevelopment while the costs of solar and wind were high. If you look at the EU average of electricity price, it's normally about 20 cents a kilowatt hour. Latvia is much lower than that at this point, and it will continue to drop, as has been announced in recent days. But really, what Latvia needs to feel is that they can own this. You know, I mentioned earlier that we're spending 6 billion euros sending it to Russia and to Norway to feed their economies. You know, Latvia needs to feel that this money is staying at home. And by staying at home, they're going to feel ownership of it. And when someone feels ownership that their money is staying locally, they'll do it. With regards to energy retrofits, today only 10% of the 50-odd million square meters of space in Latvia needs retrofits for energy efficiency, so for heating, cooling, walls, and such. You know, we can stimulate the economy with significant amount of jobs and construction to do that. But of course, people are saying construction industry, that's the largest source of black market activity in the country with envelope wages. If we are going to stimulate energy retrofits, it has to be done in a way that the government can track and only give funding out to companies who are paying wages that we know are actually being done above board with the appropriate taxes and remittances required by government. I have full confidence, and I think you guys have seen that in the past few elections, in the last two elections, both at Saima and at Riga, between President Levits, Prime Minister Kariņš, and now the new mayor Stāčs, that we have a government that is standing against corruption. People are seeing the old guard finally fall, and with that, we can use the funding from the Green Deal to stimulate our economy locally and ensure that it is the people, the lower class, the middle class, and the average Latvian that benefits from it, not Russia, not Norway, and not the oligarchs.
Carlo, you've made some great points. I'm just going to sum up a little bit. So you're saying that by implementing the funds and this investing in green energy technology, we can raise the level of people's sense of stakeholdership in their country, we can increase national security, and we can help to spread wealth to parts of the country that are not currently accessing capital. Those are some fantastic points. Thank you. We're going to move on to Lelde, and Carlos is going to be very active when we get to the Q&A session. I know it. Lelde, you've studied all over Europe. Can you tell us about how other European countries are engaging in this transition to green energy?
Yes. Hi. Yes, I have been studying, for example, in Denmark, and what I see, the biggest difference is that there is very strong collaboration between scientists and industry and also government from the very beginning. And I think this can be improved in Latvia a lot, that a lot of scientists are taking part. And I already took some part with my colleagues, for example, for modeling the greenhouse gas emissions in Latvia and to submit the approximate reduction what Latvia can achieve and calculate appropriate costs for these all actions. So it kind of takes all steps together with all involved parties. So I think that's the most point which should be elaborated even more.
Yeah, I think you make an excellent point about the use of nexus, that people connect with disciplines that might not be directly related to their own, but that have a very big impact on one another. And this bridging process is something that you've put a lot of work into, and maybe we'll go to the second slide that talks about our current energy system and what the challenges are to create what are considered to be the future energy systems. Can you tell us more about that, Lelda?
Yes, sure. So why I see that the bridge is needed, because these all systems are very different. So current system we have mostly managed independently. It's highly centralized. It's very segregated. Market rules differ for various sectors, and it's mostly fossil fuel based. Moreover, it's very rigidly linked, and this leads also to the different waste products. On the other side, we can have the very flexible system, very decentralized, fully integrated, with the active participation of all market sectors. And it will be also geographically distributed, circular and based on renewable energy, and also to have all these components working together. There will be a need for coordinated management, and this management does not include only thinking within the rules of one region or country, but it also includes thinking in the rules of the cross-border connections. And so I think the major question which I would like to raise today is how we gonna do that, and more specifically for solutions that we need, the question is, will we import them or export them? And what I mean more particularly is that it's clear that we will need this green energy, and there should be very strong decision also on a political level. Will Latvia become just a consumer of already available technologies on the market? Or we will develop our in-house solutions, fine-tune them, put them in a market, and thus also present them as an export product.
Lelda,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, but it seems to be, with the energy system, the future energy system that you're talking about, it seems like it will have an even greater necessity than ever for digital skill sets and digital problem solving. Is that the case?
Yes, it's the really important point that I see that Latvia could make, because currently there are a lot of excellent institutions in researching energy sector, and also there are a lot of excellent already available IT solutions with high experts in this field. So I see that if linking those two sectors together, we could have really big potential, which is currently, in my opinion, undeveloped a lot.
Excellent. And one of the programs you mentioned was the Horizon Fund, that
Yes.
already creates funding, but now I understand it's going to grow in orders of magnitude. What kind of opportunities are there for scientists or entrepreneurs that are looking to develop green energy technologies?
Yes, so here I want you to look into this biggest EU research and innovation program. It was called Horizon 2020. It will end very soon, and it had 80 billion euros available, and from this money around 51 million euros were attracted in Latvia until mid-2018. And on the 1st of January, there will be continuation of this program with even bigger funding available. And within this funding, one of the core priorities will be energy and climate. And there are already defined decarbonization priorities. And those include climate science, zero carbon energy, electrification, different kinds of renewable fuels, as well as big emphasis on different other sectors, not only energy, and also integration of current and future both technologies and infrastructure And here, digitalization is one of the key players to make it happen. And finally, as well, research on socioeconomic and behavior aspects so that developed products can be diffused in the market very fastly.
So even if we were to get 1% of the funds allotted to Horizon Europe, we're looking at $1 billion. That's a considerable amount of money. Is that something that enough academics know about, that enough entrepreneurs know about, that these funds are available? And how could we broadcast this? How could we market it within Latvia?
In my opinion, the research community knows about this funding a lot. I think also the entrepreneurs, but I don't know how active they are currently. But I think that in this next Horizon Europe, there will be also slight changes to have bigger involvement from the industry with the not so strict rules and bigger flexibility. So I advise to look into it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. We're going to move on to Aivars Starikovs. Aivar, one of the main pillars of Europe's energy strategy will be hydrogen, and especially green hydrogen. What does our audience need to know about hydrogen and its many applications?
Yes, hello everyone. Yeah, first of all, I really enjoyed that the previous speakers already gave it quite enough good background for full story. I will try just to visualize that what was said and just to make some points, because the direction, I would say, we are not using those opportunities which we have in the front of us, and somehow we should stimulate and open the eyes to politicians, ministries, that, hey guys, come on, it's real. May I ask my presentation? So maybe just in the beginning, quick introduction about myself, because basically, what is Hydrogen Europe? So this is Industry Lead Association. One of our, let's say, up till now, the biggest pillar where we showed up, a lot of demonstration projects and facilitated tests and demo sites. That was within our private-public partnership with the European Commission. So we have a quite impressive portfolio for projects, what, in my opinion, should be investigated. But thanks to the Green Deal, so the doors are now, it's not just open. So we have removed whole wall, so to speak. There is enormous possibilities in front of us where we can go. So please, next slide. I would say you can even skip that slide because this is just about Hydrogen Europe. So before that, what I would like to highlight, what is hydrogen? So basically there is some basic roles what should be acknowledged for hydrogen. So first of all, hydrogen is an enabler for all renewables as to become part of energy system and not only energy system. Second, this is a distribution of energy. And this is also one of the quite important points because hydrogen is not only energy carrier, it is molecular, what can be used in a lot of different applications. So then system resilience and storage of energy. So those are also the key points what I also touched previously. So of course, decarbonization of transport. Again, quite, let's say, forgotten technology from 30 years ago, but it comes back because hydrogen as alternative fuel now is quite hot topic. And that's what, let's say, my last 5 years, I spend a lot of in those demonstration projects, and later I will also touch a few of them. Of course, industry as a user of feedstock, industry as a user of energy, heat, so all that together. So basically, those are opportunities where hydrogen can provide you a solution. Next slide, please. Just a bit share of renewables. And this is the quite important topic that Latvia has not used those opportunities. So to speak, we are sitting on old heritage. Yes, we have a hydropower plants, but we are, okay, there was some small trials on wind, but we are not giving the background to those technologies and investments come to Latvia. Even legislative base is not prepared that that size of renewable projects can be developed. Basically, we just need the permission to come those projects, and then the market and those figures and samples what was named previously, Guys, come on, in Sweden, energy cost almost half of price what we have today in North Pole. This means the market is ready, so we should just give them the playground, and then we can benefit from all of that. Yes.
Ivad, I'm just going to mention that the one thing I think our audience should know is that when hydrogen is utilized, it leaves behind water vapor. It burns clean. In terms of how you produce hydrogen, there's a different story, and you'll tell more about that. But the reason why hydrogen, especially green hydrogen, is the holy grail of European energy, as you've told me and I've researched as well, is that it can be created by renewable sources and burn clean, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. I'm sorry to interrupt, but keep on going.
Yeah. But again, of course, and this is a big challenge with hydrogen, that I would say I fully support this green, and I'm fully saying that renewable, but we cannot change the system in one day. So therefore, the transition period, we should allow also sometimes gray, sometimes brown. Hydrogen, I hate those colors, but the basic point, we should have set up quite clear strategy and direction where we are going. And basically, already Carlos mentioned that we can have a full 100% sure renewable here in Latvia, but just to go there, we should start to move on. But again, there is a lot of not done things in transport. So therefore, there is a lot of opportunities where we can work on.
Now do you think that Latvia can be used as a potential testing ground for new hydrogen technologies?
I would say because of the size of Latvia, we are excellent site where we can test that kind of sample projects or demonstrate those ecosystems. I would say just one town, size of Jelgava, can be excellent playground, just so there is renewable energy, wind park, then system balancing, provided renewable heat for district heating, renewable hydrogen produced from renewable sources, providing zero emission fuel for buses, garbage trucks, trains. So that kind of systems, because of Latvia size, would be excellent playground or test field, because for bigger economies, it takes much more time. For example, in Germany, the system of decision making is a bit longer, a bit different, but we in Latvia can definitely benefit and show up that kind of solutions for another world. Just one fact about energy transport capacity, just the fact that hydrogen molecule as a gas can carry much more as electricity in the wires, because electrons is a bit more challenging to distribute. But again, there is no silver bullet that hydrogen cannot be treated as a silver bullet. No, I would say energy as itself. Therefore, please, next slide. Okay, energy storage, but I will not try to that. Please, next slide. So, but the point is because we have a precious time, and I don't want also alone spend the whole time on, let's say, telling only the good things about hydrogen. So the point is energy system and the integration of different existing systems is the key how to specify right steps to achieve all those final targets. All the systems which are today should be respected, so to speak. The best synergy should be found, and electricity grid, gas grid, and hydrogen distribution gas grid, those three, I would say, those are three holy pillars who will be holding whole energy system. Because then energy system is resilient, sustainable, and buffering each other. So to speak, all those energy carriers can play the significant role. But coming back to the renewable hydrogen, just to shortly, small insight, or I would say my vision, how I see today, where we can in Latvia benefit that hydrogen produced from renewables. First of all, we can store energy in the moments when wind is blowing, or let's say fluctuation of renewables and demand side. So how to balance this out? First of all, we can produce hydrogen in moment when energy is not used, store it, and then use one to make a greener natural gas. That's one. Second, transportation, my lovely pillar, but there is a lot of opportunities, and one of those facts was what was mentioned. We are paying every day tremendous amount of money outside from the border. But if we will produce this fuel locally, that's exactly this local, let's say, stimulation of ecosystem. And anyway, all those local entrepreneurs, they are paying taxes, so to speak. The money is coming back and much faster and coming back to the happy citizens who will pay again. They will invest then locally the money.
And if everybody's looking to invest in hydrogen technologies, if we're a leader, if we're fast out of the gates, then obviously the money that will come to Latvia will just increase and increase, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay,
and
thanks, Ivan. Sorry, I'm going to cut you off a little bit. We're going to get back to you with the question and answers. We have to move on to Eric. Eric, it sometimes seems over here in Europe that green energy is the only thing that Europeans agree on. How receptive are Americans to green energy?
So, you know, it's interesting. You know, despite the lack of leadership on climate and clean energy here in the United States, and you know, arguably outright sabotage at the federal level, I've actually been optimistic these past few years because here in the United States, you're witnessing states take leadership, you're witnessing cities take leadership, you are seeing industry take leadership, you're seeing utilities announce carbon commitments and take leadership. And I think what's driving those type of changes is really that there is growing public awareness and public expectation that it's time to take action on climate and clean energy. And the second major driver here in the United States, and actually worldwide, is the capital markets. You know, Wall Street is increasingly incorporating climate impact and climate risk in their investment decision making, and that too is driving change in this. Despite the lack of leadership at the federal level. So I think you know, the years you know, that lie ahead of us will be very, very positive and very exciting. They're not going to be easy. We're a divided country, and there are still people who fight. You know, the idea that climate change is actually real. There are people who will fight against the Biden-Harris climate plan. But I think if what you're seeing take shape within the climate plan is that there is a strong emphasis on jobs and economic development, and also, which is relevant to Latvia, because you know, green jobs are a very, very real thing. And there's also an emphasis on equity and access, and making sure that all people share in the benefits that can come from you know, the transition to a decarbonized economy. And that too, you know, earlier, you know, Carlos mentioned, you know, the disparity between Riga and Latgale. I think that type of idea of ensuring that all people participate, all people benefit, you know, is critical.
Oftentimes the Midwest is referred to, or at least some states in the Midwest are referred to as the Rust Belt. But from what I understand, there's a booming green energy business in these former industrial states, where they're basically reinventing themselves along the lines of catering to green energy and green energy technologies. Can you comment on that?
No, absolutely. You know, I think it's important, and maybe I'll take a step back when we talk about clean energy, or now the word du jour is climate technology. When you think about it, it's much more than wind turbines. It's much more than solar panels or even electric vehicles. You know, there's a vast amount of technology and innovation around making buildings more efficient. There's a vast amount of technology innovation tied to making industrial processes and more efficient and decarbonized. Transportation, obviously, You think about a vehicle, an electric vehicle. You think about a battery, but batteries still have an enormous amount of improvement that can take place. So there's scientists working on advanced materials to make batteries faster charging, longer lasting. You have people working on advanced materials on composites so that you can lightweight, make vehicles less heavy and therefore more energy efficient. So there's just this wealth of innovation opportunity around what is broadly defined as climate tech. Similarly, agriculture is a major source of greenhouse gas emissions. Here in Chicago, we have two very interesting companies that are creating alternative proteins, essentially, so that humans can feed themselves, highly nutritious proteins that are not reliant on large cattle operations or what have you, or industrial agriculture. But I think what's driving a lot of that in the Midwest is we do have a strong, there are many, world-class universities with world-class science and engineering departments. And these schools are, really, really bright students are devoting their studies to kind of the future around climate and sustainability. Whereas before you may have seen really smart kids wanting to go work at a hedge fund or go to Wall Street, you're now seeing these young people deciding that they want to do something that's more that has greater value to and greater intrinsic satisfaction, and they're very aware of that their time here needs to have impact. So these schools are seeing tremendous amount of really smart kids working on these great issues, and they have these schools have the resources in terms of labs and facilities to enable it.
Well, a lot of these companies that are aspirational in their mission to change the world also happen to be the best performers on stock markets this year. It's so you can get the best of both worlds. You can make more money than working at a hedge fund because you have shares in these companies that are going through the roof because of this investor involvement and interest that we hadn't really seen in previous booms. And because the alternative energy business, it's been around for a while. These technologies have been around for a while, and there's been different cycles of investor interest. So what makes you think that this time we've reached that critical mass that it's all systems go going forward?
Well, I think you're seeing the benefits of a lot of the early years translating to the fact that the cost of these technologies have dropped dramatically. If you look at the first kind of wave, clean tech 1.0, a lot of money went into solar and PV. A lot of people lost a lot of money in solar and PV during Clean Tech 1.0, but I don't think you would see the kilowatt hour efficiencies that you're seeing now without some of those early investments and early learnings. But I think people are a lot more intelligent about going after these science-based technologies or hardware-based technologies. They realize that the traditional venture capital model that applies well for software or other technologies doesn't really work well when you're dealing with an advanced battery or an advanced material. So people have gotten a lot more intelligent about how to build these companies and scale these companies using the right sources of capital to do it. So there's just been a lot of collective learning over the years that I think is getting incorporated and brought to bear that makes it a lot, that makes a higher degree of success today than 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Excellent. And one last question before we move on to Maria. So should Latvia be taking this transition to green energy seriously?
Oh, absolutely. The world is moving in this direction, and the job creation, the economic development potential of kind of this transition is enormous. Not to mention, earlier, I think the point was brought up around energy independence. Strategically, I think it's, it absolutely has to factor into the decision making as well.
Great, thank you, Eric. Maria, so Eric talked about his experience in the clean energy scene in the U.S. How is the Latvian and Baltic startup scene responding to Europe's transition to green energy?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, thank you, fellow panelists, for kind of like sketching in the space already. I think by now we have kind of like understood the whole space in general, like where's the needle moving, where's the shifts happening, etc. So I would like to kind of ask all of us to start thinking about the main topic here is what I think is the resources. So I hear from Lelda that we're going to soon have 100 billion funds available for green technology and research. We're going to have, there is already a direction for Europe in general that's put not only in on a continental level, but also for each country in Europe what there is, right? Including Latvia, including Estonia, including Nordics, etc. And what it all comes down is our ability here in the Baltic states, and everyone knows that we're a small nation, right, with only a handful of people. Our ability to actually take these funds, and what I mean by our ability is our ability to generate strong teams with entrepreneurial mindset who are willing to take this funding and actually bring a product to the table, right? Because Lelda, I know that you mentioned already whether we are going to be importers or exporters, that's all up to us. So we are still at this point where we can still kind of like make it into this train and start generating technology and research-based scientific products, or we're gonna take the next train and then we are already on the loser's side, right? So
okay, so we've got funding, we've got incredibly bright people. How do we motivate the greatest minds of our generation, of successive generations, to invest their considerable talents into what Eric had mentioned, that the smartest kids now in the U.S. are going into green energy technology? How do we make this something that is popular and appealing in Latvia and in the Baltic states?
Yeah, I think it all kind of like starts with the awareness level in general. So, for example, you yourself mentioned Latvia has this direction of being a green country, right? So in reality, that means we have trees. Well, everyone has trees, right?
And it's green.
I mean, like,
visually.
we do have trees, and that's amazing, and yay for trees. I love trees. Everyone loves trees. But at the end of the day, this picture that we have built for ourselves, it's a greenwashing, so to speak, the jargon that's kind of like been used in this space in general. So we're kind of like using these trees as a marketing and PR tool, while in reality, beneath these trees, there's nothing in terms of like a plan, like an actual plan. We do have researchers, we have brilliant people, we have universities working on prototypes, with probably really potentially scalable solutions. What we are missing are the entrepreneurial spirit that only can be, I think, hosted if the ecosystem players are kind of like aligned about where we are moving forward, and then bringing all their resources to the table. And what I mean by ecosystem in our industry, which is a startup industry, is usually kind of perceived as kind of like this round table of different stakeholders. So basically we need corporates, we need the state, we need the universities, and also entrepreneurs coming along the one table and starting to generate ideas how to motivate young people to move into this space. So green tech and sustainability startup space has been introduced to us in general in Europe only 2 to 3 years ago. So up until then, no one really talked about it. Yes, we have been kind of pioneering green energy in Europe in general, and it's been out there for ages. But just recently, once the Green Deal started to kick in, all of our entrepreneurs have understood, okay, the money will come, the funds will start to generate money, but what's going to happen afterwards. And now, like 2 to 3 years, in the timeline of 2 to 3 years, we start to see the shift of mobility startups, of food tech startups, of energy and grid startups, as well as hydrogen. So it's moving, it's starting the shift, and I think it's also kind of like, it's really important for those startup entrepreneurs to see this space as a sexy space.
Okay, well, speaking of which,
yeah.
One of the things that made the startup culture sexy in Latvia was the Tech Chill conference. So are you saying that Latvia needs a Tech Chill conference for green energy investors?
Also that, yes. I think for sure. I mean, that's just one of the tactics used in order to reach this. So, initiatives like Tech Chill, but for sustainability and green tech, could be one of the catalyzers out there. Because what Tech Chill essentially does, and has done for years, now I think it's been 9, we match international talent with our local talent in order to provide them with some of the gaps that they are missing out. So it's funding, it's connections, and it's also skills. And that's another great topic that we can probably discuss with the participants later on, how to make sure that our talent that's uprising and willing to take this 100 billion funding is actually skilled enough in terms of making sure that we are building scalable solutions.
Well, the 100 billion is just one program.
Yeah, that's just
the total
one
amount
program.
spent will be many times that. But yes, if we start with recognizing 100 billion in opportunity and take at least a little bit of a piece of that pie, then we'll be much, much better off. Thank you, Maria. We're going to get to the Q&A, and we're going to take a little pause here and remind the audience to please send your questions. We have a very talented group of panelists, and this is a phenomenal opportunity for you to learn something or get more information on a topic which you might not be exposed to on a daily basis. In the meantime, I'm going to cut to the chase. How can Latvia be a creator and exporter of green energy technologies rather than simply an implementer? What are the main things? Lelda, you started with this, and I'm going to start with you again. What are the things that are necessary for us to stand up and say we will be champions in this field and watch us, hear us roar? What do we need to do?
I think we can remember example of the Denmark, which had around 1970s when oil crisis hit. Economy of the country highly relevant, relying on the import of fossil fuels. And then on the governmental level, it was stated that Denmark wants to move to self-sufficiency. And then 25 years later, they became self-sufficient. And as, let's say, byproduct of this, Denmark now is leading exporter of the green technologies and expertise. So in my opinion, this should start from the top in this case.
Yeah, there's a company in Denmark that's called the Ørsted that used to be a utility. It still is a utility, but is now a world leader in offshore wind systems. They didn't start that way, but they migrated to that. They applied their special knowledge to this field. And take a look at the stock chart. It's phenomenal. Ørsted. Thank you. Kaarli, let's get back to you. What do we need to do on all levels to create Latvia as a green energy champion?
Well, one of the key pieces that has been missing in the discussion is stimulus must come from the government. It is very difficult to get private sector to agree to buy the first of its kind product. And particularly as it relates to the oil and gas industry, the oil and gas industry is the largest industry the world has ever seen. And with that, they have the luxury of never taking any risk. So they will never be the first customer for any product. The first customer for products coming out of Latvia are best served being the government. And we do have technologies in Latvia that are being deployed. Look at Salaspils. Salaspils put a solar thermal system in to tie into their district heating system. So they're no longer using natural gas for heating their district heating system, they're using solar. We have a wind technology company, Arrows, which is using technology to be able to more efficiently and cost-effectively inspect wind turbine for maintenance purposes. These technologies are there, but was Latvenergo the first company to buy these technologies? Were they ever the co-sponsors for these sorts of green initiatives? Latvenergo has done good things. We have smart meters almost deployed entirely across Latvia, but there's more to be done And I'd like to see Latvian set up an office at the incubator of the University of Latvia in Riga, or at other universities and colleges in Riga, where they have people working right alongside the entrepreneurs, both at the university and in the incubators. And put it back to Tech Chill, let's put it back to Tech Hub. Is Latvian have a representative in there learning what the entrepreneurs are doing? Is there somebody from the Ministry of Economics and Innovation in there speaking with entrepreneurs, seeing what's going on? Those hubs right now are almost always private sector driven. Where is the cooperation and the sponsorship from government and government-owned entities, Latvian, Latvijas, Latvijas, and others?
Because Karli, there's in the telecommunications space, there are incubators, right, Maria? There's companies like LMT and so forth that are sponsoring these up and coming bright minds in the digital space to create technologies, which of course they can put to use later. But can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. Well, we've seen just in the past few years that also corporate world in Latvia has been taking one of the leading roles here in terms of making sure that some of those companies that do create value-added products are making it to the market. So we have a couple of corporates doing really early stage accelerators, but nothing really particularly in the green tech or sustainability space. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say, but probably Swedbank is going to do something really soon in this space, so stay tuned for that. But in general, we see that corporates are starting to make this shift towards this space as well.
In the American Chamber of Commerce, we have a lot of American companies, very large American companies as members. And I can tell you that I follow their stocks very closely. And what I see every single time there's an earnings report, they talk about their next carbon neutral goals. And they're not talking about 2050. They recognize that the sooner they do this, the more competitive they'll be. And what is carried from this fact that Microsoft wants to be carbon neutral by 2030 means that they will only be investing in countries that are able to match this desire and this capacity that is necessary for them, according to their stated goals. Eric, what can Latvia do to be the best environment for companies like Microsoft or Amazon going forward in terms of investment?
No, I do think Maria brought up an excellent point. A lot of it is the ecosystem. We work a lot with large corporations. We do technology scouting on their behalf. What's driving that is this concept known as open innovation, where large companies realize that kind of the days of internal research and development, within the four walls of the corporation really is obsolete. And the best ideas are coming from the market, they're coming from startups, and the idea of creating a startup ecosystem where you do have young, bright minds, and I shouldn't necessarily say young, I guess I'm being ageist in that sense. When you have bright minds, irrespective of age, working on, innovative solutions, you are going to attract some of the biggest corporations of the world because they are, the next domain of being competitive is finding that next idea, finding that next solution. And if that's happening in Latvia, then you'll attract those companies. But I think key to that is ecosystem. So yes, it's government engagement. Clean Energy Trust, the organization I lead, we're 10 years old as an organization. We have always had a portion of our funding come from the U.S. Department of Energy, which is really impactful to our ability to do work. So, government has to be involved. Corporates have to be engaged. We have over 30 corporations that support our work, for example. Universities have to be engaged. And then there's also, policy and advocacy. So organizations working on policy and advocacy have to be part of the equation because there has to be a market environment that allows young companies to thrive. And at least here in the United States, historically, we have had large incumbent industries that have tried to sort of impede the progress of some of these companies. So you need a policy landscape that supports innovation and entrepreneurship and sort of the commercialization of technologies. And then I think the magic, sort of the magic element at the end of the day is you need a success story. You need to witness a company become enormously successful, because that creates a model. It inspires other people to pursue things that they may think otherwise would be impossible. It creates it creates a number of people who now have wealth, and they can go forward to either start new companies or invest in companies others create. So a key piece to all of this starting to function is having a success story. So.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Ivar, you actually have experience working with the government in your entrepreneurial endeavors. Can you tell us a bit about your project with the hydrogen extender for the trolley buses in Riga?
Maybe, yeah. Trolley bus project, that's of course, that's something what I'm proud of, at least from technical side, because our team proceeded with big OEMs of, let's say, Europe, that we proved them that such kind of solution was needed. So to speak, in Riga, we have 10 trolley buses with hydrogen range extenders. They are carrying passengers since February, by the way. I know that a lot of people is not aware about that. So station is not yet publicly available, but it will happen soon. So to speak, in Riga, we have some points. In the past, we also have worked with railway companies for retrofit projects. But in context of all this discussion, I would like to mention one key point. What is missing? Of course, there should be funds to stimulate demo projects and that kind of. But what is the next step? Basically, we are talking about market introduction. And in that case, I would say, what did Europe quite successfully? Everyone has heard about Juncker's plan that Commission has paid for risks, so to speak. Those ecosystem financial instruments basically are the key how we can get those technology ecosystems here. Just for example, wind park, electrolyzers, hydrogen storage, and the bus fleet funded as whole one ecosystem with all the stakeholders around the table. And if risks are covered, some at least partially by government, because banks today don't want to finance, in their opinion, this is not classical technology. Then in that case, it can stimulate excellent way whole ecosystem. And then all this creates value chain, attracts new entrepreneurs, new ideas for science to build at least part of that ecosystem to build here. But the key point is total cost of ownership of whole value chain. Wind is enough cheap today. So cheap electricity, I can produce cheap hydrogen, fill in the buses, and yes, of course, technology is much more expensive today, but within total cost of ownership, it is cheaper than diesel. But if whole chain is financed, and it's not always the grants. Grants are very good just to make your business paid back sooner. But within total cost of ownership, correctly calculated, you can prove this already today. So there's a lot of studies done in Europe. So in my opinion, this is one of the key moments today. Of course, grant programs should be facilitated, subsidies, but to make it large, that's exactly what should be, in my opinion, done.
Okay, I'm going to put a question out there to the panel. Back 20 years ago, we were still subject to the rigors of dial-up internet, that it would take a very long time to download something or a song, not to mention streaming something live, which could be a very painful process. Now Latvia has the fastest internet on earth, and we see that by virtue of this happening, all sorts of other opportunities open up. Now, do you see, maybe Lel, that is it naive to think that the costs of energy, as mentioned by Ivars, would decrease to such a level where it's not a matter of whether this is doable, but what won't we be able to do once this happens, right? Like the world will change considerably, and so many other things will become possible. Am I being naive in stating this?
No, I think
Good.
no, because there are a lot of examples that. Also in business, in ecosystems, there are non-linear processes happening. And also with that, costs of technologies, we have seen over and over again that these costs does not decline linearly. They decline much faster. So I think it's very reasonable. It will be becoming cheaper and cheaper. And
Eric, with dealing with, you mentioned that there's some climate change deniers in America, and I think I know the kind of people you're talking about. I know some of them are even good friends of mine. But maybe you can tell me a story about when you've seen somebody's eyes opened to the possibility of cheap, abundant, clean energy, that they understand that with accelerating cost curve declines, that this is actually an astoundingly good business.
I'll share a story from my own background. So prior to Clean Energy Trust, I was the chief operating officer for a company called Orion Energy Systems. And we did energy efficient lighting systems and controls for industry, so large factories, warehouses, and so forth. And early in the company's history, we changed out lighting at a large industrial facility. And the motivation for doing that was simply the company wanted better light for their workers to do their work. There was never a question of energy efficiency. There was never a question of climate. It was just they needed better lighting. So the facility undertook the retrofit project, and the day after the project was commissioned, the local utility arrived at the site of the manufacturing facility and was really concerned because they couldn't understand why the energy consumption had dropped so precipitously at this factory. And it was simply, at the end of the day, it was because we put in energy efficient lighting systems. But the real moral here is that the cost savings from that was so enormous. The project paid for itself in 18 months. And then after that, the manufacturing facility had, increased profitability straight to the bottom line. So this was actually in Wisconsin. So if you know anything about politics here in the U.S., very much, red state, climate denying, population, it was all about dollars and cents, right? And the savings spilled straight to the bottom line. So at the end of the day, the battle is going to be won based largely on economics, is I guess the moral of the story.
Excellent.
Hey, Paul, if I could just add two things on that as well, as to, I think tying both of these stories together. One of the successes with distributing high-speed internet in Latvia is the incumbent technologies. So the existing technologies weren't strong. Whereas if you look at other parts of Europe or even the States and Canada, we are under monopoly control by telephone companies and cable companies. That means people giving television. If there's no strong incumbent in place, as there wasn't in Latvia, it's easier to make those investments. Fiber, so high-speed fiber, is what frankly competes with these technologies. And if the original company isn't there to push back, then that's what's happening. Look at Germany. Why are they so far behind in electric car development, being blown away by Tesla? It's because BMW, Mercedes, and until Volkswagen got in a lot of trouble about its diesel emissions, they were completely against it. Latvia is in a unique position that it doesn't have what we have, a so-called resource curse. And a resource curse for Canada is we have a lot of oil. The States has a lot of natural gas and coal. These industries provide a lot of income and a lot of jobs to regular Canadians and regular Americans that are stopping them from wanting to believe in a green energy project because it's going to lead to change and it'll lead to uncertainty in their jobs. In the EU, most countries' #1 exports are cars, car parts, or oil and petrochemical products. For those countries, the Green Deal has a lot more to do with saving jobs. And look how apprehensive some of those countries are. Latvia's #1 export is wood and wood products. We're not competing. We have no oil. We have no petrochemical products. We certainly right now don't have a lot of car, or at least traditional petrochem or diesel and gas-powered cars. This is great for Latvia. the incumbents are once again weak, which allows innovation to have one less challenge or one less barrier standing between it and success.
Yeah, you mentioned the very strong, two very strong industries and influential industries in Europe, auto manufacturing in Germany specifically, and also petrochemicals. 2 years ago, only 5% of investments from petrochemical companies went towards green energy. This year, it will be about 14%. They've seen the light. They understand that there's no future for them if they continue to just invest in oil and gas. That they have to become energy companies, not oil and gas companies, and that a crucial part of becoming energy companies is investing in green energy initiatives. And with manufacturing, yeah, Tesla opened up the eyes of the big German manufacturers, something quick, and they're trying to trip over themselves to adjust. But if you have this big base, it's difficult to transition. But what you're saying is that, I think what we've learned from this panel as well, is that there are going to be a lot of extremely good, high-paying jobs in this sector. And if you're not worrying about displacing from an existing sector in your economy that's very influential, that these jobs can spring up through ingenuity and through government support and support of stakeholders to create possibly the most affluent middle class that Latvia has ever seen. Is this a possibility?
Yeah, and fundamentally in the US and in Canada, when we say, hey, this is going to create 100,000 green jobs, the reality is it's also going to kill 20 or 40,000 oil and gas jobs. And so in a lot of these economies that are tied to traditional ways of doing, there's a lot of problems, particularly in voting blocks that are very strong and very anti. Again, Latvia doesn't have these challenges in a lot of sense. We have a lot of people who don't want to spend 10 to 15%. That's the number, the average number of a household in Latvia that they spend on fuel and heating out of their salaries. In Germany, it's 3%. In Canada, it's equally low. That is an enormous amount of a paycheck that I think most Latvians would rather spend elsewhere.
Those are very good points, Karli. Thank you. Now, Lelde, I'm going to get back to you. You've been quiet, and I know you have a lot to say. So we're talking about the Horizon Project. We're talking about societal awareness. What can, obviously, I know that that people live in their own realms, and that's probably the hallmark of a good academic is being very absorbed in what you're studying. But what can the academic world do to popularize, or at least get the message out about the transformational work that you're doing? What can you guys do better? I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I think that mostly it's making a lot of things public, and this whole pandemic situation, I think it's also putting a lot of good emphasis to make education more accessible wherever you are. And a lot of people, I know that they can now just study one course in whatever university they like. And I think the researchers should go more in the public and speak about those things in a way that people from the street can understand. And this sometimes can be a real challenge if you only doing your science.
Okay. We have a question from the audience, and this goes back to a theme that that we haven't touched here, but that I'm very well aware of. It says, the question is, it seems much of the conversation around Europe's green energy transition ignores the already available green option of nuclear power. Is there any new research or more efficient reactors on more efficient reactors, and is any country looking at this option, possibly France? Do you have any comments?
Yes, I would like to take opportunity. So first of all, maybe technically it is green, but I would not let to my children such kind of heritage as nuclear waste. That would be my very clear point on that, because it is maybe technically, technologically, it is clean now, but the waste what lets after that, it's definitely not the clean. So I don't want to have a one continent which is dead. So that would be very short. In theory today, yes, but again, basically we are coming back to the point. You cannot change the whole system in one day. Basically, this is the transition point. But you should respect existing infrastructure and then find the best way through all that to get to the right, sustainable world. But definitely not just turning out all the nuclear power plants today. Of course not. Because during the night, in theory, during the night, there is energy almost for free because they should balance those reactors. Then to produce hydrogen, it is very cheap. Basically, I know also, I have some colleagues from Canada to whom we are working. And Canada is also respecting, I know that a lot of oil people also changing their minds. They say, not to lose the market today, I'm also start transition. So therefore, it is pity that country which do not have such industry behind is doing nothing, but the countries with big oil industries like Netherlands, Canada, they have all those things started. So even oil industry is on transition point, just not losing leadership and all that. So we have all those opportunities. We should just push it.
Thanks, Arvid. Anybody else have any comments about nuclear energy?
Yes, I may add that it's not a renewable. So renewable is what we can use, and it will not be less and less like solar energy, or which we can plant again like trees. And I myself have been in one nuclear power reactor in very heart of it, and what we usually think of waste is just these products like highly poisonous from the reactor, but actually it all things that are there are nuclear waste, like all clothes of the workers working there and everything. They all are waste, and they are just kept in that reactor, and nobody knows what to do with them. Therefore, no, in my opinion, we should not go that route.
Eric, how about you? Any comments about nuclear policy in the U.S.?
Well, maybe not on policy, but I would say that, I mean, what we're all talking about here is fission, but there is investment and there is work being done on fusion. Whether that can ever come together, I think a lot remains to be seen. But there are a number of nuclear fusion startups that are doing work in this area. So you know, nuclear fission, yes, you know, it's I don't recommend heading in that direction. But fusion, you know, if somebody can crack that code, there might be opportunity. But that's, you know, we're talking, you know, 20 years out, you know, so it's a long time frame.
Paul, just to give a little positive spin on nuclear, I mean, we have to thank nuclear. You know, it showed up in the 50s after tremendous sponsorship from the French governments and from the US government to use it in military applications, of course, first and eventually here. If it wasn't for nuclear, the world would be in a much worse place. It has displaced, over the past 50 years, a tremendous amount of coal. And that's reality, and we got to be thankful for that. You know, what of course, are nuclear's Achilles heels, or one of its problems, is that when the US government developed the technology, it was done for nuclear subs. And those nuclear subs have access to a lot of cold water in the oceans to keep cooling the nuclear reactors. So in essence, the technology was never finished because it stopped developing its cooling systems, an automatic cooling system. And so what is France's problem today? And equally in Germany this summer too, I know they don't have nuclear, but they have the warming issue. A lot of rivers in the European Union are warming. If you add nuclear to that, and they then dispel that warm water back into the rivers, they're equally warming those rivers more. That's a long-term devastating problem if France can't find enough cold water to keep their nuclear reactors cool. I'm bullish that, you know, there's a lot of money going in through Bill Gates and Breakthrough Energy Ventures, as well as still the US government, to try to solve two problems of nuclear. One is we got to go smaller, because from a terrorism point of view, from a cybercrime point of view, you can't have assets sitting in the middle of a potentially long-range missile zone that you could take out in one shot. Secondly, yes, these things have to be cooled a different way, and we have to find a way to deal with nuclear waste. Those are the challenges in front of nuclear. And frankly, those are not small challenges, but they're equally a lot of money, and there's a lot of smart people there. And let's not forget to thank nuclear for frankly helping avert a climate disaster over the past 50 years.
Yeah, I'll just add that when Germany went off nuclear, they ended up buying a ridiculous amount of dirty energy, or dirty coal-based energy from Czechoslovakia, sorry, from the Czech Republic, which was not very environmentally friendly. We have to wrap up. I'm going to ask you all to answer one question. What can we do? What's the one thing on your wish list? The world is watching. This is going to get back to President Levits and Prime Minister Karinš. What is the one thing that you would recommend or you would ask that Latvia does to create Latvia as a green energy champion in the next 10 years? Carla, let's start with you.
Well, I think we have the technologies, we have the people, we have the will, we have the right alignment of incentives. I think the fundamental piece that's left is that a lot of Latvians don't trust the government. And giving them 5 billion or so euros to deploy into projects right now is going to be a taxing social problem. And so the government needs to be honest on this. They need to be honest, and they need to ensure that this money deployment is done in a way that has never been done before in terms of watching for corruption, watching for watching for stealing coming through here. And we just need an honest government to own up to what happened in the past and make sure that they say, that ain't going to happen again, and this is why. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. Maria, you're involved in the tech startup scene. This is a group of people that does not ask permission to do things, to innovate, and so forth. But everybody can use help. Everybody can use more financing, more support. What is the one thing that you'd like, or that you would recommend that Latvia implement in order to help new green energy entrepreneurs build the next green energy champion in Latvia?
Yeah, we don't really ask permission for anything, but obviously we're all the time collaborating with everyone around the table and so forth. I think what is really missing, Eric himself also stressed it out, that we are missing this one kind of like key model, role model to whom to look up to, and for that to happen, we need to give more capital to founders, to entrepreneurs, to actually fail with it. So when it comes to the green tech and sustainability space, the capital out there, it's the one that we can actually access, like randomly from the streets, right? The people from the streets. It's not a lot. It's actually there are only a couple of venture funds and a couple of angels who are looking into this space in the Baltics region in general. So I think we should do a lot more job on actually making accessible capital for those founders and entrepreneurs to kind of build towards to.
Excellent. All for it. Ivar, looking at your information on hydrogen, I was so pleased that we have somebody like you in Latvia that's moving these things forward. We actually had another question of how to get funded for hydrogen technology. I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions after this seminar. What is the one thing that we can do quickly to help Latvia be a champion in a green energy future?
So first of all, I have two things. We should continue such format to have a next forum. That would be my first task. But to government point, I would say, guys, do not hesitate. Please, first of all, start to believe scientists, that this is not just a science, but those are the facts. And Latvia should not be afraid to take a really governmental plan to say, because Germany did, Netherlands did. Those countries already approved the hydrogen plants. Latvia is a bit hesitating to say honestly, but we are not asking today money. We are asking the framework that everyone who is here in the forum, that come together and have one platform regulated and supported by government. It doesn't mean the financially, but the giving this framework that we can create those ecosystems, bringing scientists by the table, entrepreneurs, capital funds, EIB, European Investment Bank. So just to give us the platform that we can, let's say, make a good start.
Excellent. Thank you, Ivan. And Lalda, we're going to finish with you because you are a scientist. You are the reason that these technologies exist, and they've blessed this world. What can you say? How can we help you help Latvia become a green energy champion?
Thank you. So yes, I totally agree that I look forward to have big round table with all expertise around the table and just to find the best solution. And another, I think, really important point to keep in mind is nowadays in science, there is approach to model everything before you do experiments. And I have seen this also before. The Latvia government did this modeling of energy systems to decide where to go. And I think we should, again, with all expertise on a board, to have this model and just run different scenarios and then to decide where to go. I think this would be the smartest way, not to start with experimenting, but start with modeling.
That's excellent, Lauda. Thank you. We've got 15 seconds left. I totally agree. We have to be bold. We have to trust our bright minds. Thank you very much for watching this panel. Thank you, Erik. Thank you, Karl. Thank you, Ivar. Thank you, Lauda. Thank you, Maria. And thank you all for watching.